oftentimes I think it's another stressor. Like, find your purpose, be more fulfilled, like have balance. Like, talk about so much stress to put on yourself. Like, finding your purpose basically is saying to yourself that you don't already have one. So it's not really finding it, it's just developing it.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Austin Zaback Show. Today I have a very special guest who I'm extremely excited to talk to and have a conversation with. She started one of her first companies at 19 years old, and during the last couple decades as an entrepreneur, she's been named Top Business Leaders 40 Under 40, Top 50 Women in Business, 10 People Making a Difference, and was the youngest female to receive the Governor's Award in Entrepreneurship in Pennsylvania, and she was recently named Person of Distinction in Arizona. Candy Valentino, I appreciate you being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so you have a lot of accolades and accomplishments, and I know that we met actually at a cool little dinner that Lindsay Schwartz put on, and just had her on the show.
Awesome.
An incredible interview. So, when we met, I was like, oh my gosh, like you're right up my alley of the kind of people I like to talk to and interact with and have on this show. So just really appreciate you being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So what I'll do is just maybe go back in time a little bit and talk about, kind of where you came from. I know that, I read through a couple of different things I found on Google, and really, really interesting. I love your story, and I'm excited to kind of hear your version of it, but you started your first company at what, 19 years old?
19, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so I have a unique upbringing. Most people go to school, learn a sport, all of the typical teenage stuff that most people do. I got dropped off at my dad's business ever since I was 5 years old. So my dad's a mechanic, self-taught. My mom cleaned houses. I just saw people work really hard, and my parents were teenagers, so it was all about survival. So totally different experience. So it didn't seem that crazy to me to start a business at 19 when I was already working in my dad's garage from the time I was 5 until I was 16. Just seemed like a natural progression. So really the only job I ever had working for someone else was when I was 16. So I have no college degree, no corporate background, and just really had an idea and saw a market need, understood business. I'm just really good at understanding patterns. So I just saw kind of a pattern and a market need and started my first business at 19 with an SBA loan and a 6-week run rate. Yeah, it was crazy.
What year would that have been in? Just out of curiosity.
Age me. 1999.
Okay,
so it's pre-internet, pre-social media.
Pre-technology.
Oh, yeah.
And so what was the business?
Spa. So it was a wellness spa and salon before they were a thing. Now when you're here, especially in Arizona, they're everywhere. 25 years ago, they weren't. So the closest one was an hour and a half away. And I was actually traveling to New York when I was probably about 18. And it was the first time I had seen New York, first time I'd seen these things. Yeah. All these women were at. And I remember thinking not only were those things cool, because I didn't know really what they were as a first experience, but the women that were going there, I thought, man, these women are they take care of themselves. They're so well-spoken. Not only did I love the business, but I loved seeing all those women that were clients. So really brought it back to a really small town. Everybody said, this is never going to work. Not here, not as a 19-year-old kid. Who's your partner? Who's your husband? All of that stuff. Sure. And it was just me. I started with 7 employees. Grew the business over and over, started developing products and different things, and started investing in real estate really when I was 22. Wow. 21, 22 started investing in real estate.
That's so awesome. That's about when I started investing in real estate too. I started in real estate at 18, but about 21, 22. So did you have a physical location then?
Yeah, I had brick and mortar. Yeah. So brick and mortar, and then I expanded into mall kiosks, and if you think about it, pre-internet, pre-social media, the online world was just evolving. So we were one of the first that offered online gift cards, an e-commerce site. Yeah. So we were truly a pioneer, and then changed that whole region because multiple different competitors came in, but we were the first. We were the pioneer in the whole county and really that kind of part of that state.
Wow, that's awesome. And you right out of the gate, you got the physical brick and mortar location in Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah, in Pennsylvania.
Okay. So small. I'm not familiar with Pennsylvania, but they're not that big, right?
No.
Do you have any idea what the population might have been back then?
I think it was under 2,000.
Wow, insane.
So, and yet there were so many little pockets around that I thought, you know what? Everybody kind of drives through this area. So if we can pick up women from all over and they have no access to anything else, because everybody's car dependent, right? Yeah. Small town. I thought this could really be something. I did not know it was going to be as big as it got.
Wow, that's awesome. And back then, just out of curiosity, what did a spa specialize in? I mean, was it, you see today, it's like facials and it's, I mean, the whole thing, right?
Well, so wellness spas back then, there wasn't Botox and fillers and all the things now that people think of med spa. It was massages, body treatments, facials, manicures, pedicures. We had a full salon with stylists. So it was all, when lasers came in, we were one of the first that started like laser therapy and light treatment and IPL and all that stuff. So
wow, that's a really cool story. I love. You know, so often you see that entrepreneurs, you know, they all typically they got started when they were really young, you know, and they failed and they had trials and tribulations and they, you know, and then they evolved over time and then, you know, who knows, like whatever they're doing today. And I'm excited to get into that. So how did that evolve? Like, how long did you do that? And then where did you pivot after that, or did you continue to grow the spa? Yeah,
so I started that, continued to grow, started getting into real estate investing, which then that just looked like that was a wealth tool for me. Most people, my friends, really at that time, 19, my friends were partying, they were going out to bars. I was trying to like figure out how to balance inventory and like do payroll and, you know, how do I market and, you know, do it. Back then it was billboards and direct mail pieces. And so I was doing that, and I really didn't have the desire to go blow off a lot of time like so many people do. So I actually went to buy a new car, and I had read a book that said don't ever buy a new car. And so I was like, okay, don't ever buy a new car. So I saw a foreclosure right up the street, and so I wanted to buy the entire street that first location of the spa was on, and this property was on there. So I was like, okay, let me just buy this. And then so I actually bought almost the entire street.
Wow.
And I did my first renovation at 21 or 22, something like that, and saw the money that you could make. And I thought, well, this is the multiple streams of income that everybody talks about. Now I'm diversifying. So I grew money that way for investments. Really I always say I flipped my way into Paradise Valley because it was one after another, bigger, bigger, bigger as it goes. I started really growing the location, bought another building where the spa, you know, expanded that way, expanded downstairs, so added onto every single piece that we possibly could for new service space. Because with brick and mortar, you're either growing your products, growing your team, or growing your physical square foot. Like that's it, so that you can do services. And so did that. And then I started realizing pretty early on that anything I recommended. So if you were a client of mine, you already know, like, and trust me. So if I say to you, Austin, you know what? I think you should start using this and this on your skin or your hair or whatever. Oh, okay, great. People buy it.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, okay, so I'm buying this for $20. I'm selling it to you for $40. What if I manufacture my own and I can get it for $10 and sell it to $40? Now I can. So it was really just a learning experience along the way. And so I just grew that, got into different businesses, started other businesses, sold. I mean, so just kind of along the way, just figured it out and invested in real estate too.
I love that. And now, would you say that real estate is your primary thing, or would you say that there's still businesses that you run that are your primary thing, or is it just kind of all of the above?
It's all the above. I mean, if I actually probably broke it down, real estate is my primary thing, but I don't focus. I mean, it's so fun to me. Like, I really enjoy it. I have, you know, a massive renovation, 7,200 square foot renovation going on right now. 2 of them, I love it. So I don't really look at that as like my business, but I guess it is.
Yeah.
And then I really just help other entrepreneurs, and that just kind of evolved from people wanting to take me out and pick my brain and take me to lunch. So I just kind of grew founders out of that. It's just helping other entrepreneurs break through and, you know, avoid some of the mistakes that most entrepreneurs make early on.
Sure. I love that. I'm excited to dive into all that here in a minute. My brain gets going and I have so many questions, and I feel like viewers and listeners have the same questions. Back then, you know, now everybody listens to podcasts, right? They go on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok or whatever. And, you know, but back then, like, what were the books and stuff that you were reading? Were there books and stuff you were reading? Was it like the Napoleon Hill type of stuff back then, or what?
So it was all books back then, right? It was, well, the very first exposure to anything outside of my own view of the world was at 15. There was an infomercial, 3 a.m., which most people, I don't even know if some of your listeners will know what those are. Infomercial, 3 a.m., and it was, you know, this large guy with these big teeth talking at this beautiful resort saying that you're not a product of your circumstances and you can change your life. And I was like, it really resonated. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. Like, I like that. And so at the time, I was 15. I had a babysitting and a golf ball business at the time, but I didn't have a credit card. So I said to my dad, I really want to get these tapes. Like, I think this is really going to help me. This guy says you can make all this money. And he said, and my dad's a great guy, but we're all limited by our own beliefs, right? Sure. And so he said, all you're going to do is give that guy your money and you're going to be right where you are. So he wouldn't let me use his credit card, even though I had the $600 to buy it. So I said, okay, watch me. So we were at Sears one day, back in the day, when they had paper credit card applications in the thing on the counter. And I swiped one, filled it out fraudulently. Sorry, Discover. Yep. And back then it was a different time. So I got a credit card, ordered those tapes. So that was the first exposure, Tony Robbins. Personal power.
Yep.
And then from there, it was Napoleon Hill. It was The Millionaire Next Door. In business, it was Good to Great. It was studying Starbucks and the Ritz-Carlton and Marriott and all of these mega brands. And so I would go to them to experience it. I would really evaluate what I see that they do really well. And then if there was any books that I could find, I would just research. So I always say there's a difference between higher education and self-education, right? People can go to college, they pay to get an education, often from people that never even did what they're teaching you to do. And instead what I did was I got to be paid in my business to then in between clients or in between staff consultations or whatever, like be able to read and give myself a self-education. So, and trial and error, because that's how a lot of people learn. So it's like, how can you, if depending on where you are in your life and your listeners, like how can you develop your own education? Because oftentimes we don't realize that not only when you go and get that formal education, the money that you spend, but it's the time that you waste. Yeah. So when all my friends were 4 years partying and living it up, by that time, I was making far more than any of them in that same 4 years, and they were looking for an entry-level job.
Wow.
So I think that shift is really what set me up to do it young, and then it's really about just playing the long game. Sure. Like, you know, how showing up when you don't want to, showing up when the cameras are off, showing up when you're not feeling it. I think we've gotten a little soft as a culture that if it's not, it doesn't feel right and it's not great, that we don't want to do it. But if you want extraordinary results, you're going to have to do some ordinary things over time. Yeah. And so that's really just, there's nothing, I always say, there's nothing about me that's special. I didn't do anything unique. I didn't charter a rover to Pluto or, you know, do an electric car. I just did really ordinary things pretty well over time.
Consistently.
And that effort pays off.
Wow. I love that so much. There's so many golden nuggets that you just talked about. I could like peel back the onion on a million things. One of my questions would be like, you know, you look at your dad, right? And a phenomenal guy. But he has, to your point, the limited mindset of, hey, you know, for whatever reason, his parents taught him, or who knows, but that you would buy the Tony Robbins thing and you would be right where you are, right? What do you think it was in you that didn't believe that? Like you believed that it would make the difference and that you could be the anomaly. I mean, do you have any idea where that might have come from at the time?
So I think it's a little bit of personality. I think when you go through really tough things in your life, that one challenge isn't going to throw you off your game. So, you know, obviously grew up in a trailer, teenage parents, you know, sexually abused as a child. And so for me, going through a lot of difficult things, including like where I went to school, I went to a little weird private, like almost cult-like school from first grade till I graduated. So I think going through really difficult things, a lot of the insignificant stuff that people tell you, you don't take it to heart because you have a proven track record of all the shit you already done.
Wow.
So I think for me, it's like, well, you're not going to be able to do that. To me, it's like more of watch me. So I feel anytime someone throws that criticism or doubt your way, you have two options. You can believe it and retreat, or you can challenge it and move forward. And I would just rather kick the stone over to prove either them right or wrong, but at least for me to identify it myself and make sure that I take the effort to see. So, and I think everybody listening to this, they know instinctively when someone challenges that way or someone criticizes an idea, they know in their gut. But what happens is we listen to external noise as opposed to that internal guidance. And I'm certainly not all woo, but I think that there's science behind that we know the next step, but we allow that visceral response to everybody else to either deter us from it or quit or being afraid. And I always just say, like, why not? Like, when I get to the end, I would much rather have tried a bunch of shit and failed at half of it than to not try and play that safe route. Yeah. So, you know, I just think I think that's in you, but I also think that you got to develop the muscle and get through the challenge. Because like right now, if somebody wanted to do something crazy I've never done before, if I chose, like, I'm going to buy this company that's $20 million and we're going to, you know, it's a different industry. And someone's like, you're never going to be good in that industry. Well, my track record, because I've tried so many other things and haven't failed, or if I did fail, I moved past it, proves otherwise. So you have to be able to move forward in order to get the proof and remember who you are and what you've done.
I love that. It's almost a way to build self-love and self-worth over time. You're proving to yourself over and over again, hey, I'm either going to do it and succeed, or if I fail, it's really not a failure because I'm just going to do it again and again until I succeed.
Right. It's confidence. It builds confidence. And it realizes too that like that failure or you pivoting or you changing or whatever doesn't define who you are. It just maybe wasn't the right opportunity for you. It maybe wasn't the right step for you in that moment. Like businesses either succeed because it's the right founder, it's the right time, it's the right market. Like there's so many variables. You could be the smartest freaking founder in the room, but be in the right industry, real estate, in 2008. And if you start to think that that's because of you and you're not going to take the next step, then forever you're going to doubt your ability to do the next thing.
Wow.
But if you just realize that this might not define my ability, it might have just been the wrong time, the wrong industry, and just keep moving forward till you find the right thing, then you'll be able to get further down your path.
It's all in the mind. You know, I've spent a lot of years, you know, learning and studying the greats, the legends, and you know, I've started 12 companies myself, and you know, if I've learned one thing, it's that everything is in the mind. You know, it's all about our perception and how we react to things. And there's so much we could go on and on. And I love everything you just said. So, you know, when you had this rougher upbringing, I had a rough upbringing too. I grew up in my grandparents' garage and whatever. You know, and I see a lot of people that have rough upbringings. You know, what do you think it was that, like, how come some people, they'll have a rough upbringing and they fall into the victim, you know, mentality. And some people have a rough upbringing and, you know, you fast forward 10 or 20 or 30 years down the line and they literally attribute a lot of their success and things that they've accomplished from that very rough upbringing. Like, what's the difference between those two people in your opinion?
Choice.
Wow.
I think it all just goes back to our decisions. I think everything where you are in your life right now, you literally have a choice to view it one of two ways. You can view it that it's the reason why you are where you are, and that you're not in that place that you want to be in that next level, or you can view it exactly why it is and why you have the tools and the power to move forward.
Wow.
I believe that when a circumstance happens to us, because I've looked back at this often and thought, you know, what is the difference? There's nothing about you or I that's special or unique. Like, what is the difference maker that chose for you to take the next step and to do something with what happened as opposed to not because of what happened? And I think what happens is when a circumstance happens in your life, it's taking that, you know, our subconscious brain is so freaking sharp and quick. It's like you have to purposefully take, I call it the pause. If circumstance happens into your life, whatever that may be, whether it's you're doing or not you're doing, someone does it to you or you make a bad choice, we have one split second to decide how we're going to view this. Are we going to go down the victim spiral that is going to take us to shame, guilt, regret, or are you going to take this into more an empowered path and be able to get power from it, be able to step forward? Because I think that's where all of the purpose and all of the fulfillment in life is really found. It's experiencing the circumstance, and it's the journey that it takes to go through and who you become on the other side. Like, when I look back, if I would have had the perfect situation, if I would have went to the perfect school, had the perfect parents, there is no way that I would be as like resilient and persistent and hardcore as I am. And although there's some problems with that too, you know, it also gives you the ability to do a lot of things that most people would have fear. So you can look back at any single thing at any point in your life and you get a choice of how you want to define it.
Yeah.
And it's really that simple.
Wow. I love that. It really is as simple as just a choice, you know, and we have a choice almost every second of the day.
Yeah.
And everything that, you know, everything that's happening is happening for us and not to us, you know, and I think it's important that we understand that. You mentioned something, you were talking about that there can be negative consequences as well to, you know, being, and I'm very similar. I'm very aggressive. I'm loud. You know, I had a rough upbringing, and I'm hard on the people that I love, and that has gotten me in a lot of trouble because people mistake it for me being mean, but really I'm being hard on them because I see potential in them, and I'd imagine that in maybe different ways, there's things that maybe could be perceived as negative qualities.
100%.
What are those, and are they actually negative in your opinion, or is it just the world's way of viewing it?
I think that it depends on the person. it depends. So for example, like you were sharing that it really, for me as a female, especially, I have a lot of those characteristics. And for a very long time, I've tried to minimize them. Because even, 2022 is a totally different world than 1999 or the early 2000s. Like, there wasn't girl gangs and hashtag girl supporting girl. Like, there was none of that.
No boss babe.
No boss babes. Like, if anything, it was predominantly, even in a spa world, it was predominantly male industry. So you really had to show up. And a lot of times, I think even men were different back then. I think men now are used to women being in more powerful positions and they can handle it. But back then, it was almost like a competition. Or it was like, you shouldn't be this way and you should be. So there was a lot of that for a lot of years that I thought, okay, people don't like confidence. You should be more meek, should be more quiet. And all that did was it just led me to showing up smaller than I could have. And even though I don't think I showed up small, looking back, I know that if I would have stepped into more powerfully earlier, that I would have been able to accomplish even more than I have. Wow. But I think it's a learning curve. I think it's also understanding that when someone else, whoever it is, looks at you for the way that you communicate, the way that you're maybe a little tough love, maybe they don't think you have empathy, there's really only two things that are happening there. They're seeing a way that you communicate is triggering something in them. Maybe they too had a rough upbringing, but they haven't healed from it. So the fact that you're healed and you're coming forth with this power and they haven't, they can actually look at you and be re-triggered by their upbringing or jealous that now you're confident and past it. Wow. So normally when someone has an issue, unless you're a complete asshole, normally when someone has an issue with how you are in that regard, they themselves have something that's unhealed in them.
Wow.
And so I think if you can look at that with empathy and realize that they still have a path to go down their journey in order to completely heal that, I think that it's easy to try to soften yourself as opposed to just understand they're not where they need to be.
If you haven't already, go to austinzaback.com and go ahead and scroll down and put all of your contact information. And that's how we're going to stay in touch with you. We're going to send you new insider information to our exclusive community, all of the new offers, the new courses, masterminds, and any valuable information that we believe that you need to know. This is how we're going to let you know about it. Again, go to austinzaback.com, fill out all of your contact information, and I can't wait to send you all kinds of valuable information on a weekly and monthly basis. Now let's go ahead and get back to the show. It's such a common thing that we as human beings will minimize certain things about ourselves to try to fit in or to be liked by other people. And, the result of that from what I've found is, lack of confidence, lack of self-love. Like you said, not fully stepping into who you are and that power of what, you're capable of. And it's so important, I feel like, to step in and be who you are and whatnot. In your time of being an entrepreneur and in the early 2000s, et cetera, what were some of those obstacles that you faced being a powerful woman, entrepreneur, business owner? How did men react to that? Did it cause any problems for you? And how did you overcome that?
Yeah, so many, we'll say. So in the dating world, and then we'll use the business world. In the dating world, what it was I was different, which then men typically liked. Like, oh, she's different, she's confident, she's this. But then what would happen if you were with the wrong guy? They would try to change it and try to make you not as confident. So unfortunately, I attracted a lot of that along the way, and didn't realize that sometimes your confidence can make somebody else feel insecure. And that's men or women. Yep. And so I think that's in that world. In the business world, I think that a lot of times you walk into a room and I could, right now, you and I could walk into a totally different room and someone would just assume that maybe if the CEO's coming, it's you. Now, that's maybe not as prevalent today, but it really was back in the day. So oftentimes you're viewed as almost like an addition to someone else. So when your opinions are strong or when you know what to say, oftentimes I would deflect to say contractor. Like, I know what we need to do in this house, in this renovation, but I would reflect to my contractor and be like, hey, so this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? And by him delivering the information, the crew would respond completely different.
Wow.
But by me doing it, it's like all of a sudden they're second guessing, how could you possibly know this? So then what happens is you have a choice. You can either stand further up and kind of pronounce your dominance in what you know, or you can just allow it to come on its own. And that's the route I've kind of taken. I don't ever want to force knowledge or make someone feel a certain way. So I'll still to this day do that. I'll be like, hey, Corey, can you let them know that we need to change this and this? And sometimes it just comes different. And I've just accepted that. Like, I don't need to try to change the world as far as that goes. I'm just going to try to maneuver in it as much as I can.
I like that. I think it's actually really powerful for women, and we are gaining more and more women, followers and listeners. But, I loved talking to Lindsay and talking to you already. Seeing you guys and what you're able to do is just incredible. And I think that we need way more of that in the world, honestly. Like, I really do believe that there's a lot of men that shouldn't be doing what they do. It should be a woman. Women are better at so many things than men too. That's another part of it. But I love that. And I think it's really unique that you've identified the different ways to approach it and go about it. And I think it's really cool. People then get to, because once a person has a conversation with you, I would imagine, like even me, and really starts to understand your credentials and who you are, then there's no questions to be asked anymore. Right.
But isn't that interesting? It's like it almost has to be verified.
Yeah, it's so weird.
It's so like almost to the point where it's like, oh, you're a flipper? Oh, so you're doing your first house? No, I've been doing this for 22 years. Oh, who's running this job? There's almost like always a doubt. And so rather than me ever feeling bad or insecure or that I need to prove it, I just feel like the world hasn't evolved quite to the point yet. Yeah. We're on our way. But if you really think back, it's like the world hasn't been around since women were just given the right to vote. We're just like all of these things has not been that long as a society. So it's going to take a few more generations to get away from it in order for it to shift. And in that time, I'm happy showing up and just being who I am, doing what I do, and just understanding that sometimes people, their view of how men and women are from their experience, from their upbringing, just isn't there yet. Yeah. And that's okay.
And you're making an impact every day. The people in your world and that are around you are viewing it differently every day.
Yeah.
It's almost like for me with age. I'm 20. I just turned 27. I started my first company when I was like 8 or 9 years old, let's call it. 12 companies. I was a part of 3 or 4 network marketing organizations. I've had 18 jobs. I've hired and fired over 1,000 people, and I've done $1 billion in real estate, right? And very similar thing. If I'm out doing anything grand, people immediately are like, "Well, hold on a minute. Like you're 27, right?" Yeah. And it's very similar in a totally different way, where people second guess it. They look at you and they say, "Well, hold on a minute. That can't be right."
Yeah.
And very similarly to you, I've learned to just be okay with that.
That's right.
And
I think that if, being 19 and a female when that was happening, 22 and a female in a real estate type of investor
20
world.
20
years ago. I mean, it was crazy. Like I would literally say, "Hey, Dad," he had nothing to do with the job, but I'd be like, "Hey, Dad, can you just come to this one project with me?" And just by him being there, they would handle things differently.
Wow.
Like it's crazy. And actually probably not that long ago, I'd say 5 years ago here in Arizona when I started my first, I had that happen again. Wow. Where I was like, he's like, "What do you want me to say?" I'm like, "Just stand there. You don't need to say anything." And I did this with Anthony too. I was like, "Just stand there. You don't need to say anything." But just by his presence, and he has no clue about anything construction related, but it shifts. And so rather than caring or getting a chip on my shoulder or feeling that I need, like, I don't care. Because I think when you know who you are, you know the knowledge you have, you know what you can contribute, it's like you don't need to prove. So I'm totally fine for someone to assume that I'm a fitness influencer or, whatever the crazy things that people come up with when they meet me. It's changed over the years until they have a conversation. They're like, "Oh shit," I'm okay with that.
Right.
It's almost like I look at it because you get a choice, right? Yeah. I look at it as a benefit. I get to show up and people underestimate me.
Yeah.
So it's underestimation as opposed to like when you walk in the room and somebody thinks like, Tony Robbins walks in the room, "Oh, he can't have a bad day because of the expectation."
At that level.
I walk in, they're like, "Oh, what's this girl know?"
Everything you do, you're over delivering.
Surprising on the upside. It's like the best.
I love that.
So it's all in how you look at it.
And it's all perception. It's all about how you chose to view it, right?
That's right.
And therefore you live happy and you are in peace and you're not. I love how you handled that, and I think it's phenomenal. Huge golden nugget. So I'll shift a little bit. I know now about, you obviously got into real estate. You bought almost the whole block when you had that spa in Pennsylvania. What are some other businesses, and then I want to talk about real estate in a minute. What are some other businesses that you started that are maybe like your favorite or that you really enjoyed over the years?
There's so many. I would say probably one of the most favorite was product. I loved manufacturing my own products in China. So in e-com, before it was a thing in the early 2000s, I developed a jewelry line and had suppliers and manufacturers over in China and set up everything over there. And this is kind of an interesting story. It's a funny one. Everyone's like, same thing. You know, I was 25 maybe at the time. And I had already had this, you know, thousands of clients at the spa and all of these employees, and people were already, you know, I would wear this or oh, where'd you get that? Where is that? And they'd be like trying to look and search for it. So I was like, well, you know what? We should just develop our own line. So developed our own line. And I was like, everyone's like, well, how are you going to be able to communicate with China? Because this was really before the Alibaba. It was like just coming on the scene. So I was like, well, I only know like one place in this little town, and that's the Chinese restaurant that can speak it. So I literally went there, no joke, for probably almost every night for like a month and had conversations with, and I was like, hey, can you talk to this supplier? Hey, can you talk? You know, and we would email back and forth. My assistant did a lot of that stuff. But sometimes you just needed someone to be on the phone. That was fun, developing our own designs, doing e-com, having mall kiosks, like shipping out products. That was just something different. And so I looked at that business as just something to develop my diversity in industry, because, you know, now I've got brick and mortar retail. Now I've got service-based. Now I've got e-com. Now we have products. You know, now we do real estate investing. So I love that I have the diversity of, like, you know, 6 different industries that I can work my way around, which allows me to apply them to really any business that needs help with anything. Yeah,
I love that. And I think, you know, doing that at the time that you did it, you must have learned so much. You know, now it's like you turn on a YouTube video, they don't even like it. You can't even hardly even trust what they're saying. It's
exactly.
Like, I mean, because there's just so much information.
Yeah.
It's like the opposite, right?
It's the
like,
opposite.
Well, who in the heck do I listen to here?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I love that. And so, is that something you still do then?
No, I sold that. Yeah. So that was the first one that we exited. Yeah.
You said you do retail and service. What are those businesses that you do now?
So I exited my last company in 2019, and that was the spa. So the spa had all different types of retail. We had jewelry in there. We had products, candle, like, you know, this whole little kind of store inside of that. So we did that inside. And then just basically with the jewelry line, we also had retail with that, because we were in mall kiosks. So we had e-commerce and we had the retail side of things. So wholesaling, obviously buying things, wholesaling it to other places that carried the line, and then retailing it ourselves.
And that just evolved. Was that the same spa that you started way back in the day, and it just evolved over time?
It completely evolved over time. Yeah. And really, you know, I always say, like, one of my biggest mistakes in business was probably something I'm most proud of, because, you know, I was doing that. I was, you know, investing, and to everyone I had known, I was making the most amount of money of anybody I knew. And so that's another problem for your listeners, that if your circle is to the point where nobody there is really elevating and you become the highest earner or the biggest fish or whatever, like, you're not going to continue to grow because your view is that you've already achieved that mountain, not realizing that there's one more big fucking mountain to climb, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it was like realizing that, oh my gosh, I have all of this. I'm leaving my office one day. There was a building for sale on the corner, and it was going to kind of complete that one section of the street. And I got in my Escalade. I had the shoes. I had I had all the things. Yeah. And I was driving by, and I remember saying, what am I going to do with that building? And it was like a voice, just like we're talking, said, put your animal shelter there.
Wow.
And I'd never consciously thought about opening a nonprofit or starting something, but I always had a heart to give back. Right around the time I was, you know, the Tony Robbins tapes, I was sending money to every animal charity that I could possibly send, and kids in Africa and all those programs that they had. But I'd never thought of that. And it was at like that moment I thought, this is what this is all about.
Wow.
Like this. And so all the things that I had done to business at that point was super proud of, but I felt like they were all on my merit, my effort. And when I started to take the steps forward for the nonprofit, it was like doors open, things happened, and I was able to leverage all the business relationships, all the real estate relationships, and got a lot of the stuff done for virtually free to that building, and started a nonprofit. And we've now saved, I think, 8,000 animals. We have a 62-acre farm. We save all species of animals, have programs for at-risk youth, kids that are in the foster system and consider abuse. So it's just like a full circle moment to give back.
Wow.
But that shifted my focus a lot. I had 3 additional locations in 3 cities.
Of the spa. Okay.
Yeah, already like negotiated, ready to go. And it was like a realization moment I had. I was like, I can do these locations or I can do this nonprofit.
Right.
And I just listened to that instinct that's kind of been guiding me as a kid when you don't have someone else to bounce ideas off of or ask for that guidance. And I was just like, I just feel like it makes no sense to me, but I also feel like I need to do this.
Yeah. Like I don't even know where to begin type of thing or whatever.
No idea where to begin.
But you really felt that was like your calling. You love animals, I would imagine? I mean,
yeah.
Prior to that, obviously.
Yeah, always wanted to save all the animals, always wanted to help. I did a black tie charity event that I helped another nonprofit do like when I was 20. I couldn't even order a drink and I was like running a black tie charity event. So I always had a heart to help. But it was just, I think that's the other thing. I think oftentimes in business and life, whatever word, there's always that like, I shouldn't do this, I should do this. And I think sometimes we ignore it and we just try to take the next step or do the logical thing.
Right.
And if I ever look back at any mistakes that I've made, it's because I tried to logically rationalize a step that I was taking rather than just listening to the gut instinct that I had. And so I'm super glad that I looked at that and felt that and went that direction. It's kind of like why I moved to Arizona.
Yeah.
I knew no one when I moved here. And all my friends were in California. I had a huge network in Pennsylvania. Like, I mean, every congressperson, senator, judge, the governor, so that was like really tough to leave. It made no logical sense to move across the country.
Yeah.
And yet I felt like I knew I had to. I had an incredible relationship at the time, had no desire to like break up with them.
Sure.
But I was like, I have to move.
Wow.
And so I just think it's important for us to acknowledge when that happens. And when it doesn't make sense, just do it anyways. Because if you believe that you can figure it out along the way, you will.
Wow.
And that's literally what my life has been. Just believing that I can figure it out. Because oftentimes I think, especially any of your listeners, if you are trying to do this next thing, you want to take on another investment, you want to start a company, whatever it is, you want to get a relationship, people think, oh my gosh, I can't do this. But if you look back at all of the things you've done, all of the childhood that you overcame, any mistake that maybe you made that you came out better on the other side, and you remember all of those things and you reflect on them, then why wouldn't you be able to get through this next thing too?
Right.
Like, why wouldn't you be able to accomplish this next thing? Because look at the shit you've already done.
Right.
And so I think a lot of times we don't take that time to look back and reflect. And I think that is really massively valuable.
Wow. I think that is extremely powerful. 100%. I couldn't agree more. And I think, looking at what you've done instead of, we make up all this crap, right, in our brain. And you really got to be careful, I think, to learn how to control your thoughts and really say, well, hold on a minute. That thought is not doing me any good, right?
Right.
I'm going to choose this thought over here, like you're mentioning, right? Because this actually makes sense. I can wrap my brain around that, right?
That's right.
But that over there, like, I don't know where that thought came from, but
That's right.
I don't want to be a part of that, right?
It's like start a business. Oh no, that's crazy. My everybody has a job. Let me just go have a job. Like any of that stuff, if you have that feeling, it's there for a reason. Like, and even if it ends up being a mountain that you don't climb, there's something that you learned in the journey. Because there's no way that something was placed in front of you when it's ethical and moral and all of that. There's no reason that something wasn't placed in front of you that is at least a reason why you should be considering it.
Yep.
So rather than, it takes the same effort to go towards it than it does to go the other way. So why not just one time, just try to go towards it?
That's powerful.
It's that belief, and I think that it's the belief, and then it's also the action. Because, multi-million-dollar companies are not made on ideas.
Sure.
Ideas are cheap. They're a dime a dozen. It's the implementation and execution of that idea that creates million-dollar businesses, million-dollar life, million-dollar relationships.
Wow.
So having the idea is one thing, but what's the next step to move it forward?
Right.
And how can you implement and execute on that idea and know that you don't have to have it? If I would have known that when I started flipping, okay, well, in 20 years, I'm going to be flipping multi-million-dollar estates, like I would have never done it because I didn't have the belief or the knowledge then.
Too scary.
Way too scary. So don't ever look at 10 steps down the road. Just take one.
Wow.
I always say, know the what. Don't worry about the how.
Wow.
If you know the what and you allow the what to drive you, and people always say why, but I feel like it's so cliche now. You got to know the what, and you got to know the purpose of the what. Like not the purpose of your life. That's another crippling belief that people have. But like, what is the purpose of what you want? Is it going to give you freedom? Is it going to give you flexibility? Is it going to whatever it is? And then don't figure out the how. Just take the next step and be persistent and be resilient. And you'll figure it out as you go.
It's almost like getting in your car at night, and you turn on your navigation and you're going from here to Sedona. your headlights shine 200 feet in front of you, and the maps tell you the next turn.
Exactly.
Your headlights nor your maps give you the full. You can't see from here to there.
That's right.
And it doesn't tell you all the. Imagine if you dig your maps and it gave you all the directions all at one time. She's like, turn right, turn left, turn right, left, go straight, right. I mean, you'd be like, oh my gosh,
yeah, it's a great analogy.
Wouldn't be able to handle it, you know. So I could not agree more. I love that. You said so. You moved. You had a feeling, right? And coming to Arizona was a feeling. You were with somebody at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'd imagine that's not who you're with now.
No, we're still together.
Okay, so that wasn't okay. Got it. And so he came with you then.
No.
So walk me through.
This is a crazy, So actually, we'll rewind. So in 2005, I came to Arizona for the first time. By that point, I was traveling all over. So I'd seen a lot because I was about 6 years into the business. Things were successful. I had not quite started the nonprofit yet. So lots of cash, heavy investments. So I was traveling all over, and there was something about the first time I was here. I could not put my finger on it. And at that moment, I wanted to move. Even though I had a super successful company and all of these investments, I saw the real estate market here, I saw the business world here, and I was like, I want to move. At that time, was with a different guy, much smaller view of the world, also had a business, but wanted to stay where we were, didn't want to move. And so I started to rationalize, like, okay, well, that makes sense. That was the first rationalization. That makes sense. Had I done that, I have no regrets, and I'm grateful for the path, but I look back and think, had I done that, what I would have accomplished and built in just a short period of time, even before the crash in 2008, to then be able to pick up and swing on the other side, right? Again, I know that I needed to be where I was for a reason. But when I was like, okay, well, if I can't move here now because of the business, then I will when I exit, because when I started my first business at 19, I did what most people don't do, which was I knew exactly what the business was going to be. And it was going to be something that I exited. Even though I knew no women at that point that ever built and sold a company, I read people doing it, and I was like, well, why can't I? So as opposed to saying like, well, I don't know if I can do that, shift that question and just say, why can't I?
Right.
And that's what I do all the time. Why can't I? So for that, I was like, I'm going to be done by the time I'm 40. So by the time I'm 40, I'm exiting, and I'm going to be able to be retired. I'm going to do what most people won't do right now, so that by the time I'm 40, I can do what most people can't.
Yeah.
And so when I started here for the first time, I was like, I'm going to move here, and I'm going to walk to get my coffee at this one spot that I was at. Yeah. And that's what I did.
Wow. Wow. And so what happened in that time? So because the person you were with at that, long time ago, when you first, saw it here and you wanted to move here, and you said that you remember you kind of minimized you're like, okay, that makes sense. You rationalized it, right?
Rationalized it, yep. Then
what kind of happened in that relationship, to then you actually like moving here? How did that whole thing play out?
So here's the interesting thing. This is what we don't typically look back, because most times you have to get along your life further in order to have more data. It's like business, right? When you have a business longer, you have more data to be able to look back and see trends and see, oh, okay, well, we made this decision here and that didn't work so well. Most people don't do that in their life.
Wow.
But if you look back at the data of your life, and oftentimes it's tough until you get late 20s, early 30s to at least have enough data to see trends. When I look back, it's almost like everything from that decision on, I started doing the same thing. I started giving a little more. I started not showing up quite as much. And it created this chain of events. Now, granted, a lot of beautiful things came, other businesses came, other real estate investments came. But I do see something now that I look back at the data, that a lot of things went a little bit awry from that point on.
Wow.
Now, fast forward, I did exactly what I said. Sold and exited that last company when I was 19, or when I was 39, 40-ish, somewhere. But it was right before I turned 40. And then was able to move here full time. Now, I was in a different relationship. Sure. So incredible. We get along great. Incredible relationship. Super loving. Like, totally not my experience of other relationships in my life.
Wow.
But knew that I needed to be here. And as scary as that was for him, because I'm sure that it felt like I was leaving him, it was really just me following something that I knew I needed to do. And he has kids. So he's committed to his responsibility of what he has and what he's built. But I also don't think that just because one person has one type of responsibilities that minimizes what you want to do. Mm. So he can still be an incredible present father because that's what he committed to. And I committed to not having kids so that I could have ultimate freedom and flexibility whenever I wanted.
Sure.
It's like one isn't more important or more valid than the other. So and thankfully I'm with somebody that's understands that, and he's amazing. And so he comes out here every other week.
Wow.
And so he's there with his kids once a week, and he comes out here. So totally weird scenario that I don't know anybody else that has that set up.
Yeah.
But it works.
It works.
And it gives me the ability to grind, because I tend to do that, which is tough for a lot of people in a relationship. I tend to grind, and I can work 12, 16 hours. It's not like I'm trying. It just happens. Like I like it. And then I can, unwind a little bit when he's here and enjoy a little bit. So I think that's the other thing. Like, we don't need to find balance. Like, oftentimes I think it's another stressor. Like, find your purpose, be more fulfilled, like have balance. Like, talk about so much stress to put on yourself. Like, finding your purpose basically is saying to yourself that you don't already have one. So it's not really finding it. It's just developing it. And the only way that you can develop and be more purposeful is to really take more risks, to go in that direction of what you don't know yet. And, just be able to be confident to not have all of it figured out and do it anyways.
Wow.
So I think that's the same thing with balance. You don't have to balance your life. Sometimes our life is, I always say, it's like a 2x4 with buckets, right? Those big Home Depot buckets. It's like sometimes you're more in work bucket. Sometimes you're more in fun bucket, and you just need to balance it out, but always know what the end result you want for your life is so that you can make decisions accordingly.
It's almost like, I think Tony Robbins refers to it as like work-life integration, right? And it's just like, how do I integrate all this? I mean, here's everything that's important to me, and I want to do it all.
Yeah.
And like, and the world says, well, you can't do that if you're going to do that.
Right.
And you can't do any of that if you want to do that over there. And it's like, well, why does the world say that? Like, why can't I just do it all?
Yeah.
And figure out how to do it all, right? And so I love that you say that, and it's something I actually really believe in. And I've struggled over the years because people will try to beat into your brain that you're doing it the wrong way.
Yeah.
And you really got to guard that and be like, well, hold on a minute. Like, where did you get your data from?
And that's the thing, right? Everyone's perspective of their experience. Like, even I look at my dad. It wasn't that my dad was trying to discourage me like consciously.
Right.
What it was his view of the world. And most times when people are they're trying to protect you, to guard you, for you to not make mistakes. So it's really not with malice and ill intent, but it's like, oh no, you have to build a business this way. Or, oh no, you have to make sure to have fun on the weekends. Like, but that's from your perspective and your view of the world. And your view doesn't necessarily dictate mine. So be okay to chart your own path, to do it your own way. And the only way that you can be okay with that is to also be okay with failing. Like, going all in and being part of hustle culture and then realizing, oh shit, I got burnt out. Like, you have to do that in order to know. I did that. I didn't take a week's vacation for 15 years.
Wow.
Just grinded. And then I thought, I'm going to like have a nervous breakdown, and literally took a month off. And then I was like, okay, maybe I need a little balance, but everybody's different. It's like someone could look at me and be like, oh, she's part of hustle culture. No, this is the way I'm wired. If I purposefully sat on a couch and did nothing, I would drive myself crazy just because you think I need to relax on the weekends.
Right.
And for somebody else, it may be they can't work 12, 16 hours in a day, and that's okay for them. Just know who you are and what you want, and then build your business or your life accordingly.
I love that. I think that more people need to talk about that, and I think that you're so right about just figuring it out for yourself, and you're not judging other people, and you don't allow judgment from others. It's just like, hey, here I am, here's what I want to do, and you fail along the way, and you figure it out along the way. Like you said, you did your 15 years, and then you took a step back, and you're like, whoa, like I gotta take a break for a minute, right? Yeah. But then you came back, and you maybe just course corrected by 1%, right? You're like, okay, I was just 1% off here. I'm gonna go like right here, and then that was like, okay, it's a little bit more balanced, right? But to somebody else, you still might be a total workaholic, but it doesn't
100%.
It doesn't matter, because there might be somebody else that thinks you don't work at all.
Exactly.
Elon Musk is like, well,
what the hell are you all doing?
Right. I love that, and I think a lot of what we've talked about today, or you've talked about, is it all ties back into building your self-confidence and loving yourself and accepting yourself. And so many people, I feel like we live in a world where people don't do that. Everybody just wants to be somebody that they're not, and like chase something that doesn't. I mean, it's just the weirdest world we live in nowadays. You
have to be okay with who you are, but you also have to be okay with who you're not. And I think that's people like, well, I'm okay with this. Okay, but it's also, you have to be okay with who you're not. Like, we live in such an extreme world too. Like you're either part of hustle culture or you're, like there's no in between. It's like, no, life actually happens in between. That's really the beauty of it all. And I think that's that part with just, we have to make sure that everybody's this or that, and that you don't want to really be fully come who you are. I think that's the greatest fulfillment in life, is to just allow all of those expectations around you to drop and just be like, okay, who am I? And remember too that you get to change and be whoever the hell you want to be.
Right.
Like, so if you don't like who you are, that's also a choice.
Wow, that's powerful. It really is. And it's just being self-aware.
Yeah.
And making the choice. I love that. So I'll pivot a little bit, and I want to talk about your real estate business. And so you've obviously worked all the way from that first deal. Was that your first deal that you bought?
23. Well, there was one right before that, but the one that I feel is my first deal was a $23,000 foreclosure.
Wow, that's so great. What did you do with that deal? Just out of curiosity.
I held it for a while, and then I sold it.
Okay, yeah.
Flipped it. Yeah.
So you've done a ton of deals. Do you have any idea? I mean, ballpark wise, how many deals you've flipped?
I knew when I was driving here, I'm like, someone's going to ask me that one day. I don't, because it's just like
No
part
worries.
of the, so I would say, 50 to 100. Like,
Wow.
it's really that wide. I don't really know,
Yep.
because for many years, it was just a hobby.
Sure.
I did it as opposed to going to the golf course or shopping or like that was my jam. So I just, sometime there was one, I took a 14-bedroom nursing home and converted it back to a single family, like gorgeous estate on 7 acres. That took a whole freaking year to do.
I bet.
So,
Yeah.
and I'm running other businesses, so it wasn't my only thing until more recent.
Gotcha.
So it's been my only thing more recent. I've done Airbnb, short term. I've done long term. I've done really everything except for Section 8. That's the only thing I haven't gotten into.
Wow.
But I like flipping.
Yeah.
Like, that's just been the whole thing. And I think that's another part. If anyone's looking to invest in real estate, you got to do a bunch of stuff and find out what you like.
Right.
Because you can be a specialist or a generalist. Like, if anyone wants to look this up, this is actually going to be in my book, but, specialist and generalist. Like, for me, I've always been a generalist. I know a lot about a little, like, I know a little about a lot. And for real estate, I had to figure out what I really wanted. Like, okay, I like real estate, but do you want to be a landlord? Do you want to have a management company? Do you want to do short-term homes? Do you want to do Section 8?
A million verticals.
So many, right? So what I realized from doing, because we learn and develop as we do, not as we sit on the couch and think and manifest, right? So as we do, I learned that, okay, the part that I actually like is the deal, sourcing the deal, getting the deal, getting it. Like, I love that. Oh my gosh, I love that. I love getting the house, doing the full design, getting my crew in there, and then just showing up a little bit every day. I still love to do that. I don't do it every day now, but I love to do that. And just check on things, make quick decisions, and then I love to see it when it's done. It's like the ultimate before and after, right? Like, so that's what I love. After that, I'm not interested.
Sure.
I'm not interested in like $5,000 a month or whatever. Like, that doesn't excite me, even though it's certainly beneficial. I then like the next side of the deal. What can you get? Who's your buyer? Like that whole thing. And so now a lot of these, what I'll do is like that first one, like I'll still maybe hold it a year and rent it. So you don't have to pay, all this. So I don't know how much you go into that with your audience, but like short-term gains, long-term gains, cap gains, all that stuff is important to know. And so I typically will hold some of the bigger ones a little bit and maybe do a short-term rental but what I love is the actual deal, securing on both sides, and the process of doing the flip.
And I think it's important to know what you love, and figure out, especially, I mean, in anything, but in real estate, like we're talking about real estate, because there are literally, I don't even know, but there's hundreds of verticals. I mean, you can syndicate, multifamily, you could commercial, ground up development. I mean, you could just go forever and ever and ever, right? And so you really got to figure out, well, like, you can't do it all.
Yes, that's correct.
At least, I mean, you'd have to be a big conglomerate with a huge team. And
100%.
Maybe
tons of capital.
Right.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, you certainly can't do it all. So figuring out what you love. And because it's interesting hearing you talking about flipping, where you talk to another guy and he hates flipping. He's like, I absolutely hate it. It's a nightmare. Everything goes, what can go wrong will go wrong, right? And then, you come along and you love flipping.
Yeah, because I love that.
Right.
I love that anything can go wrong.
Yeah.
There's always a new challenge, and you can always figure it out.
Yeah.
Because that's what I'm good at. So
It's
I
who you
love
are.
that. When the deal's done, sure, would it be profitable to do, a huge mega like short-term rental complex or a bunch of Section 8s? Like, absolutely, but you can make money doing anything. Like, I had a client that was making $250,000 selling T-shirts on Facebook.
Wow.
you know, and he's just like a surfer type. Like he didn't want a big business. He didn't want employees. Like I know someone else that's doing like 1.2 in a course with like 0 employees. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Like, so make sure that you're enjoying what you do. You don't have to wait and find what you love and find your purpose, but just make sure that you enjoy the grind. Because otherwise, you know, if you don't love what you do, somebody else is going to outrun, outlast, outsurvive you in your industry.
Sure.
If you love what you're doing, like this flip I'm working on right now at 7,200 square. I love it. Like no one's going to come in and do a better job than what I'm doing right now because I freaking love it.
It's in PV.
It's in PV.
Okay.
I do like high-end, super classy, like high-end flips.
You have a couple right now, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And what do you love about like the high-end luxury flipping market? If you've ever wondered where we skip trace all of our data, we actually use batchskiptracing.com. We skip trace millions of records on a monthly and annual basis, and this is how we do the wholesale volume that we do. This is also how we do so much volume in the retail real estate industry as well. Without good contact information, how are you ever supposed to get a hold of the homeowner? Again, we use batchskiptracing.com for all of our skip tracing solutions. And as you can tell, Batch has the best quality data in the industry. And good quality data is arguably one of the most important things that you can have as a real estate agent or real estate investor. When you use batchskiptracing.com, before you check out, make sure to use the discount code ZABACK, ZABACK, for a discount. Let's get back to the show.
Well, so everything I do, even in business, I like to deliver with excellence. And a lot of times flippers are using Home Depot and Lowe's. They're just trying to like lipstick on a pig, you know, and I just feel that quality will always outlast anything that someone tries to do for cheap.
Wow.
So I love that in luxury, you can do quality work and that discerning buyer is going to see it. So literally I had an open not that long ago on one of the properties and a bunch of people came in and that was the most common thing they said was like, wow, you can tell the quality of this construction was really strong. So that's what I like. I also love, for me, anytime I get into a project, not so much now, but in the beginning, I would get into a project knowing that's what I love about real estate is flexibility. If I get into a project like right now, everyone is so concerned about this market, which maybe we'll get into. Everyone's so concerned about this market. Well, you have flexibility in this investment. If you put money in the stock market, your money's just either got to grow or you got to take it out.
Yep.
That's it. Like that's the whole point.
Yep.
In real estate, if I get into it and the market starts to shift, well, okay, if people aren't buying high end, you damn know sure that they're going to be renting.
They have to.
So now I can shift it to a high end rental. I can do Airbnb. We could do masterminds and video content. Like there's so many options that you have, or you could live in it.
Right.
So it's like I love with real estate investing how many options that you could really have and what ultimate almost control that you have on the property as long as you buy and source it right. That's really the most important part.
You make money in the buy.
Got to.
That's what they say.
And you have to have your numbers strong in the reno.
Yeah, I love that. And what are some complexities that, you know, is when you go and you flip a $5 million home or whatever, right? How is that different than a $500,000 home in your experience? I mean, like what, you know, I mean, a contract's a contract, right? I mean, it's an extra comma, some extra zeros, but are there things that make the bigger ones more complicated other than just higher end finishes?
I mean, it's really the same.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, it's to me, it's just all the same components. There's really not that much, obviously more capital intensive. Obviously you need to know your stuff. Like you have to know your shit and your design. Yeah. You have to be able to really think about and know what high-end buyers want. Like where they want the laundry location, like how they want their kitchen laid out, like what are the most common layouts and flows? Who's going to buy this house? Is it going to be someone with kids? Is it going to be an athlete? Is it going to be a couple? Like, so that when I do that, like right now I have two that are completely opposite. One's like more athlete, couple, you know, two business owners would be perfect for. The other one could be with some kids.
Okay.
I look at that completely different in the design.
Wow.
And if you can do that and you make sure to do some high-end finishes that you know that they're going to like, you also want to make sure that you're looking at trends. Like look at your designs. If everything on the market looks a certain way and you're just starting to see like maybe some browns coming back in and some wood tones, if it's going to take you 6 months to do that reno, don't be doing what's on the market now. So you need to project designs and finishes. I like all that because it challenges me. If I just went into a $500,000 house and just slapped something on there, to make a little bit. I am not excited about that.
Too simple.
It's too easy.
Yeah.
So I like the more complicated, the more complex, the more walls we can tear down. So I love the ones that were originally built in PV in the late 90s. And nobody touched them.
Yeah.
They've got sunken in floors and little windows and, a little slider.
They got the pillars.
Yes. I think everything I bought has had pillars and sunken in living. And I love that because you can make such an impact and a return on making some of those changes that no one that can afford a $5 or $7 or $10 million house wants to go do that.
Yeah.
So if you're the one that does it, now you're going to be able to pull all that equity into your pocket.
When you find deals, we were talking a little bit before the show. We source a lot of deals, and I've flipped a couple in Arcadia. We've done like 1 or 2 in PV, and nothing on your level. We've done a couple ground up development. How do you source your deals typically? Is it just your network? Are you on the MLS every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning before everybody else? Or what trend have you seen in how you acquire the deal?
So here's a little different in Pennsylvania, I had my whole network. I knew people. People knew I was an investor. I knew the divorce attorneys. I knew the estate attorneys. So if there was ever a deal to have, I kind of had the inside route with all of them. And if anyone's listening and doesn't know what that means, if you're looking for wholesale deals or those are great resources for you to know divorce attorneys, estate attorneys, anyone that's looking to dump a house really quickly, maybe you can get a deal on that. Sheriff sales, tax sales, did all of that in PA. Back here, I didn't have that network. So I had to be a little gritty again, which again was challenging. Sure. So MLS, Zillow, Realtor.com. I also looked all the time at Airbnb just to kind of get a feel because again, that flexibility. When you're in a new market, new state, and you don't really know, okay, what's this? I didn't have a good feel here as much as I did there. So I needed to kind of get my footing and make sure that if I got into trouble, because when you're taking care of yourself and you don't have a trust or a rich husband or someone to fall back on, you got to make sure that you're smart with your decisions. So I needed to make sure I had flexibility if I needed to in the higher end markets.
And that's you really taking the time and doing the due diligence, looking, like you said, you're looking at how are the design, what are the color combinations and how are they changing and how might they change in the future, and what would this, if I had to put it on Airbnb, what would it go for? Right. If I had to short-term, 3-month minimum, what would it go for? If I had the long-term, what would...
I look at all that.
You look at all of that.
Yeah.
And that's what makes you successful because you are approaching everything with an insane amount of just precision, right? And real to the best of your ability. Nobody's perfect, but you are really doing everything you can in your power, within your control, to make good decisions and to be ahead of the curve.
Well, business and investing is really simple. Everyone wants to take their emotions and they attach their worth and they, how they feel and all of this, but feelings aren't facts. The facts are in the data. The facts are in the numbers. So really when you just take all that other crap and set it aside and just look for the data, look for what the numbers are telling you, it's really tough to make a bad choice, a bad decision in an investment or in a business because that's what you have to go off of. So rather than just this, throwing balls against the wall and see what sticks and I think this is a great house, take the due diligence and actually look to see what would happen in a worst case scenario. I do this if I'm acquiring a business, what does this look like in the worst case? And if I can live with worst case scenario or I can get by, then I'm all in. Wow. But I'm not going to do that just from shooting from the hip. We're going to follow the data.
Ray Dalio talks about that, analyzing and looking at what is the worst case scenario. And if you can live with the worst, then you can do it.
That's right. Right. It's like a casino in a sense, right? How much can you lose? And if you're all right with that, then play.
I love that. And I think looking at the data, that applies to everything we've talked about this whole podcast. Even when you look at personally, right? And how our self-limiting beliefs get in our own way and all these different things, look at the data. Right? Are you making this stuff up? What does the data say? Oh, you've done all this stuff and you've had success and blah, blah, blah. Why are you getting in your own way?
Right.
The data says otherwise, right? Throw that in the garbage.
Yeah.
I love that. I know we're getting a little long, but I do have a couple more questions.
Sure.
So, nobody's got a crystal ball on the market, right? But I love asking everybody that I sit down with because I'm a real estate guy myself. What is your opinion of the market that we're in and then maybe the next, just couple years out, where do you think we're headed?
So no market, no industry, nothing can continue up on a trajectory forever, right? It's just impossible when you look at the history of every single market that ever existed. There's always going to be ebbs and flows. There's always going to be pullbacks and resets. And there's no way that you can flood over $3 trillion into an economy and not expect to have some issues. And obviously we're seeing what those issues are. We're seeing inflation, we're seeing great resignation, we're seeing cost of goods go up, we're seeing suppliers take longer. All of those things are attributing to everything that we see. So is there going to be some sort of a reset or pullback or whatever people call it? Of course, because there's just, no matter what, there's no way that it would have just continued the way that it was. In that said, though, there's going to be certain markets that are going to have more problems than others, in my opinion. I think anything under a median price, anybody that got a lot of that stimulus money, anybody that got and now had extra that they wanted to spend with great rates, maybe got into a house a little more prematurely than they could necessarily afford. So I think under 400, I think right now it's in the mid threes or so, low fours, the median house of America. I think those are the areas that we'll see a little bit of trouble. I think we'll have more foreclosures and opportunity there. And then I think as you get anywhere in the middle class, anywhere from the 400 into that million mark, depending on the city, us as a country, it's going to fluctuate. Like where I'm originally from, there were never push-ups and there were never pullbacks.
Wow.
Everything really ran 3 to 6% all around the same. So it's like you were kind of insulated in a bubble because there wasn't huge amounts of people moving. And the only people that were leaving typically are when they die because it was a really aging population. So depending on the country that you in, obviously the more push-up that you had, the more opportunity you have to kind of pull back a little. I also think depending on how COVID continues, if it continues, right, a lot of people were leaving states that had crazy restrictions to move places that didn't. Not to know if that's going to stay. A lot of people that moved maybe go back to those places that are a little bit, because our memories are short, and we go back to what we actually left. So I think there's going to be a little bit of that, but it will never go back to, like, I look at PV. It's just the new norm. You can't. It's like here. You can't all of a sudden charge $4 for a bottle of water and then make it $1 again. It just
doesn't go back.
It's not going to go back. So I do think that there will be pullback. I do think it'll reset just like anything else, but it's not going to be 2008. It's not going to have huge, but it's just, I use the analogy of like anything that you do. Everything that we're buying now at the grocery store that's more isn't just going to suddenly be less. It's now going to be the new state of the norm. So.
And your strategy for buying in a market where maybe we do trend down a little bit depending on our sub-market and where we're at in the country and all the analytics and the data, people moving and going and things of that nature, is the strategy as simple as, hey, again, we make money in the buy, I got to buy a little bit deeper when I do buy? Because you're obviously still buying. You're optimistic about, making money in the real estate market, as am I. Or is the strategy more complex than that, going into an uncertain, potentially market?
I keep things very simple in business and investing. And I look at it like this. If I get into an uncertain market or I have hedged it incorrectly, all it boils down to is how long I can hold it. So if I bought wrong or bought too high and now the property can't sell as a flip, I know I just need to hold it long enough to get through this market and I'll be fine on the other side and I'll make money while I hold it. So that's why I like the flexibility. So to me, it's more about where I buy. I'm not going to buy in an HOA. I'm not going to, like, there's certain places I won't buy because then I don't have the control and the flexibility. But really, and anybody that's listening now that's like, oh, I really love this house, but I think it's overpriced. If you're planning on living in a house for 5, 10, 15, or if this is your dream home and you can afford it now, get in the freaking house, because as long as you're going to hold it over time, it's just like buying a stock at the wrong time. It's going to go down, it's going to come up. But if you look at the whole chart, it's always going to have these dips and keep coming back up. So that's, to me, that's the way I look at it, is if I made a wrong play, I just got to hold it longer than I might want.
Yeah, I mean, if you bought in the peak of 07, 08, and you were live as a primary, and that was your dream home, you're going to live in there, and you still live in there today, you made a lot of money.
Exactly.
Exactly. So trying to time the market's not the right answer when it comes to that, right?
Absolutely.
When you're obviously the shorter term investments, that's where you got to do your upfront homework to know all your different options, just in case something were to not work out.
That's right. Yeah. But I think when you're doing this, it's just about the length of time. Like anything, like you can get into a business at the wrong time. But if you just play the long game and you focus on the length of that business and not in the moment, I think, social media has changed our brains a lot. Like, we're so focused on this like short-term stuff. We don't look at like what you can do in 10 years, 20 years. Like, that's where, and how it compounds. Like, what I'm doing now it's exponential what I ever thought I would have been doing, even when I was in my 20s thinking, oh shit, I've made it. Like, you know, it's like, oh my gosh, like there's a whole other level that you don't even know. But if you stay on the sidelines and try to time it, you're going to miss out on so much time.
Wow. I love that. I think Tony's the one that says we overestimate what we can do in a couple of months and we underestimate what we can do in 5 years or 10 years or whatever. Yeah. And I love that quote. It's exactly what you just said. Yeah.
So true.
So I know in kind of wrapping everything up a little bit here, I want to talk, you said you're working on a book.
Yes.
Is this your first book or have you previously been an author?
No. So never an author. It's kind of, this is another just interesting story. You know, everyone told me, you know, you're not going to get a book deal. You're not going to get published. You're going to have to self-publish. And I was just like, oh, okay, no big deal. Like I really wasn't actively looking for a book because I have like no time. So I was like, what am I going to write a book? And it was one conversation led to one email that led to one Zoom.
Wow.
Multi-book deal, major New York publisher. Like, so all of the things. And so it's coming out in the fall. And I just share that behind the scenes because it's important to remember, like we were saying earlier, that oftentimes people's experiences and what they went through to get something, they're now sharing their experience with you. But what you don't realize is if you believe it, it's going to limit you.
Wow.
So if I would have believed many friends that are New York Times bestselling authors and have all the followers and all the fame on, you know, social, if I would have believed them and thought, oh, well, that's the only way to do it, then I would have limited myself from this deal. I would have thought I needed a proposal and an agent and all that. I didn't have any of that.
Wow.
It was one conversation. So I think it's just important to remember, too, that, you know, someone else's journey doesn't have to be yours. But it's coming out in the fall. It's called Wealth Habits, 6 Ordinary Things to Create Extraordinary Financial Freedom.
I love that.
And it's just a lot about the ordinary things that I've done, you know, from self-education to real estate investing to, you know, just doing a lot of the smart income diversification, a couple rules that I have with like investing in stocks and stuff. So
I love that. Okay, awesome. Well, we'll make sure to link everything down below for that.
Perfect.
And then you do events as well, correct?
Yeah.
What exactly do those look like? I've always I used to do events a long time ago. Haven't done them in a while, but I've heard that you've thrown some awesome events. So what do you guys do there, and how does that look?
Yeah, so we have a spring and a fall. So the next one is November, which also coincides with my book launch. So it's going to be a big one. It's the Wealth and Business Summit. We break down everything wealth, from real estate, all the different verticals in real estate, to, you know, just even investments in general, to business, how to grow and scale, like the real things.
Yeah.
I think what happens too is in social media and in podcasts, you have so many people that haven't done something. They're just regurgitating information and talking points that they heard from someone else.
Yeah.
What I do is I make sure to bring together like the best business minds, like the CEO and founder of LifeLock, like, you know, people that have built mega brands, like, and created a whole industry, like the cauliflower pizza crust. And like, so we really bring together people that have had 10, 20, 30, 40 years experience in business and talk about all the shit that most people can't. How you need to diversify your income, how to reduce your taxes so that you don't bleed money out of your bottom line, how to expand and scale your team. Like, so we talk about all of that and give real tangible takeaways where it's not just more information that you write in a book and put on your shelf. People get to ask questions, engage. So we had, you know, Damon John, that a lot of the names that people recognize, like Damon John and Ed Milet, people don't know Todd, you know, or Tom Hatton, or all of these other people that we had that have built, you know, 100, 250, $2 billion companies. Rick Steele, who's done 14 billion in e-com. Like, people don't know that name because most of these people like me were behind the scenes doing things. Now they're just talking about it for the first time, but the wisdom there is like so invaluable.
Oh, I can only imagine. Yeah. A couple day event.
Yeah, so it's like a 2.5 day. Okay. The next one's at the JW Desert Ridge here
in Arizona. Wow.
Yeah, here in Scottsdale.
And you said that month is the month it falls in?
Yeah, so November 9th through the 11th is the event here at the JW, and then my book launch is, as of right now, end of November.
Okay, awesome. So I'm sure there'll be information at the event about the book launch and everything.
Yeah.
Okay, and then where can, I mean, even for me, like, is the registration still open for the
event?
Yes,
yeah, you can go to foundersorganization.com, go right to the events. I think we still have early bird pricing going on right now. So it's a great group of people that are really trying to build and scale. Obviously diverse industry, but a lot of investors, just a lot of people that just want to really learn the information that most people aren't talking about.
Yeah, and events change lives. You know, I've talked about that for almost a decade now. Network marketing was my first industry that I ever did as an entrepreneur. And, you know, they're obviously known for events and masterminds and growth cons and whatever.
Yeah.
And every event I've ever been to in my life, that industry or another, it'll just, one golden nugget, one thing somebody says, and you just totally, your paradigm just shifts. And you walk out of an event, typically, if you walked in with an open mind, you walk out a different person.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes, our brains can only, I don't know who said this or who discovered it, but our brains can only measure what we can lose. It can't measure what we can gain. So oftentimes people are looking and be like, oh, well, it's this much for a ticket. It's 2 days. What am I going to learn? But you can't measure what you're going to miss by that one connection, that one conversation, that one thing that'll break through that next level of business for you that can generate millions of dollars from here on out. Like the ROI on that, or just one connection. Like I look at this one conversation that led to this book deal. Like I can't even measure the ROI on that.
What's the ROI?
What is the
You wouldn't know till you were lying in your deathbed.
Yeah. And looking back and connecting the dots, because you need the data.
Right. You need the data. You need all the data.
That's right.
All the way to the very end. Yeah. I love that. And I believe we're always one conversation or one relationship or one thing away from our life changing forever, in a good or a bad way.
Yep. Oh, that's so true.
And so events, again, change lives. So we'll make sure to put all that information. I definitely want to be there. I'll be there. I love that. So final question I have for you is, if you could, and I'll give credit to Lewis Howes. I love Lewis. He's a phenomenal podcaster, and this is the one piece that I take from him. And that is, and I think he asked it a little differently, but that is, if you, for whatever reason, the book couldn't go with you, any podcast, nothing you've ever done or said could go with you, and it was your final day on earth for whatever reason, and for whatever reason, all the stuff couldn't go with you, but you could leave behind one piece of advice, one truth, one thing you've learned, could be personal, business, whatever, to your family, to the world, that you've learned so far. What would that piece of advice be? What would be that thing?
It's interesting that I think I shared it for a hot second earlier, but I think that it's anyone that is experiencing pain. Like, really what I want to do is to help minimize people's suffering, whether that's financial, emotional, whatever. I think oftentimes we look at our pain as what's keeping us from the next level. The trauma that we experience, what we've gone through. But I actually think pain is the path to that next level. It's the path to your purpose. It's a path to true fulfillment. And I think if we turn towards that which breaks our heart and not turn away from, I think it's going to get us closer to the big picture, because we can talk all about investing in business and money, and a lot of people love that. But really, why are you here? Like, how do you want your life to be? What do you want to contribute? Because anything, like Tony Robbins always talks about, the 6 human needs. And what most people don't realize is there's only one human need that can give you all of the others. And that's contribution.
Wow.
Contribution gives you certainty. It gives you variety. It gives you love and significance. And if we don't find that until later in our lives, I think all of the things that we do now won't make sense. So turn towards what breaks your heart. Go through all of the pain, because that's one step further to where you need to be. Wow. And I think that it's really just finding your way to your most fulfilled and most purposeful life.
I love that. I think there's nothing for me to add to that at all whatsoever. Well, in conclusion, where can people find you? Where can they find, obviously, you talked about the event, the book deal. Where would you like people to find you? I'm going to put all your information, obviously, down below as well.
Yeah, so Instagram and TikTok are the biggest platforms. So Candy Valentino, and then foundersorganization.com or candyvalentino.com would be the sites to go.
Awesome. And one last question. What was the name of the nonprofit for all the animals?
Thank you. Heal Animal Rescue. Healanimalrescue.org.
Okay, awesome. And they can go look it up. And
go see all of our animals. And
okay, incredible. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I feel like we could talk all day, but really appreciate it. And I know everybody watching and listening will appreciate it. Guys, definitely go follow her, shoot her a message. Check out all of her websites. Get her book when it comes out. Try to go to the event if you can. And make sure, if you haven't already, to subscribe. If you're on YouTube, if you're on podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, leave a review. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.